What if I told you that the entire US government was built from a single, really revolutionary blueprint? Well, that blueprint is called federalism. And today, we're going to unroll it and see exactly how this thing was put together. So imagine you're one of the American founders. You've got this huge puzzle on your hands. How in the world do you take 13 fiercely independent rival states and forge them into one powerful nation without completely crushing the very freedoms they just fought a war for? I mean, it seems like an impossible task.
But their solution, it was totally radical for the time. See, instead of choosing between a super strong central government or a loose collection of states, they came up with a blueprint for a government that could do both. It was a system designed to balance power in a way the world had literally never seen before.
Okay, so let's start with part one, a government blueprint. We're going to break down the basic layers of power here. The easiest way to picture it is like this pyramid. Federalism creates these layers of government. You've got the national or federal government right there at the top, and then you have the state and local governments sitting below it. Each of these layers has its own specific job to do. So the textbook definition is pretty simple. Federalism is a system where power is divided between a central, national government and various regional governments, like our states. But I want you to think of it less as a neat division and more like a constant tug of war, a negotiation over who has the power to do what that's happening every single day. Okay, so if power is divided, who actually gets to do what? Let's dive into the second part of the blueprint, the division of powers. This is where the framers got really specific about the details. And honestly, this Venn diagram is the perfect way to visualize how it all works. You can see some powers belong only to the federal government, some belong only to the states, and then you've got this overlap, this shared space right in the middle. Now, these categories have some official-sounding names. You've got enumerated powers. Those are the powers specifically listed or enumerated for the federal government. Then you have reserved powers, basically everything else that's reserved for the states. And finally, concurrent powers. These are the jobs that can happen concurrently or at the same time at both the federal and state levels. And this is where it gets really interesting, where the rubber meets the road. You can see the logic here, right? Big national issues like printing one single type of money for the whole country or making treaties with other nations, that's got to be federal. But more local stuff like running schools or deciding on property rights, that's reserved for the states. And then you have these shared responsibilities, these concurrent powers like collecting taxes or building highways, because, well, both levels of government need to do those things to function. But wait a minute. With all this shared power, you just know there are going to be fights. What happens when a state law and a federal law completely contradict each other? Well, the framers saw this coming. So in part 3 of their blueprint, they included the ultimate tiebreaker. It's called the Supremacy Clause, and it is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful sentences in the entire Constitution. It says, very clearly, that federal laws, quote, shall be the supreme law of the land. So let's just break that down. In plain English, it means this. When push comes to shove, when federal and state laws are in direct conflict, federal law wins. Period. This is really the glue that holds the entire system together. It ensures that for all its divisions, the United States is still one unified nation. Okay, so we've got the blueprint's layers, and we have its tie-breaking rule. But where can you actually see this design in action, day in and day out? Well, the answer is in part 4, Congress. And I mean this literally. This isn't just some abstract theory. Federalism is built right into the architecture of Congress. It's the physical place where that compromise between national interests and state interests actually comes to life. And this is just a brilliant illustration of that balance. On one hand, you have the House of Representatives. Their representation is all about population. It represents the will of the people directly. The more people a state has, the more representatives it gets. But then you have the Senate. This is the game changer. In the Senate, every single state gets exactly 2 senators. Doesn't matter if it's California or Rhode Island. This chamber represents the states themselves, making sure the smallest states have a voice that's just as loud as the largest ones. So, in our final section, let's just ask the big question. Why does this centuries-old design still matter? Well, it's because this blueprint directly impacts every single law that affects your life.
So here's the most important thing to take away from all this. Federalism isn't some old, settled document. It is a constant, dynamic, balancing act. That tension, that push and pull between national unity and state independence is designed right into the heart of Congress. And what that means is that every single law passed in America is the product of a compromise between what's good for the nation as a whole and what's good for the individual states. And that leaves us with one last, pretty crucial question. This blueprint, a design drawn up in a world of quill pens and horse-drawn carriages, still shapes every part of our modern lives. So we have to ask, is it still the right design to balance the incredibly complex needs of America today?